We stand here together, hands joined, hearts joined, minds joined, and voices united as one people. We pray that the hearts and minds of our leaders may be opened, that they may be granted the capacity to listen, the courage to respond, and the will to act with fairness, accountability, and responsibility. We pray for the mothers and fathers doing all they can to support their children, whose futures depend on the choices made here today.
Welcome to another episode of Behind the Scenes, where we talk about the reality of TV. Today we're talking all things business. We're exploring the business of film and television, and I am joined by Luke Rouse. If you are a lover of local comedy, you would know who Luke Rouse is from Rouse House. Luke, welcome to Behind the Scenes, and thank you for joining us.
Hi Z, thanks for having me.
It's been a minute, hey?
Yes.
How has things been in the industry with everything that's been going on?
It's a tricky space we find ourselves in. 2025, 2024 was the beginning of a tough space. 25 was harder. And to be honest, it looks like 26 is going to be an even harder outlook unless something serious changes.
You're not giving me hope.
Yeah, I'm sorry, there's not a whole hell of a lot of hope. I mean, there's some things on the horizon that are developing, but in the space I'm in, TV and film, it's hard. It's hard to make it happen. Yeah, I think we have a unique confluence of different things taking place. The broadcast environment, if you think of all linear and streaming broadcasters in this territory, South Africa, there's been a challenge, you know. If I just list them, like SABC is still not commissioning nearly at any of the rates they used to. In fact, on SABC's website, they won't accept any 100% commission proposals. They're only looking for AFPs or part-funded, co-funded co-productions, which is difficult to find the funding for. Then we get ETV. They're a solid business and they're continuing, but they're not expanding. In fact, last year was a bit of a contraction with ETV, and I've heard that their market strategy around these long-running telenovelas is shifting slightly.
And EVOD and stuff.
Yeah, EVOD. I mean, I haven't seen that many original productions for EVOD recently. And then they still keep dubbing these Turkish dramas into Afrikaans and other vernacular languages, which works for them, but it doesn't really work for the local production industry.
It does not.
Yeah.
I hear also Canal Plus is trying to do that now. They've just purchased MultiChoice, as we all know, and now they're talking about dubbing French productions. I mean, they came in with like a big hoo-ha that, oh, there's going to be local production, there's going to be EE, and all of that. And now we're hearing in the news that they think they're canning a lot of local stuff and bringing in dubbed French things. And that is, it's, in as much as we want to remain hopeful, it's not a nice thing.
No, it's not. Yeah, the MultiChoice Canal Plus deal took a very long time to close.
It did.
It was basically the whole of 2024, and it's really only kind of hit the ground running now in 2026, the beginning of 26. So I think end of January was their first 100 days worth of, completed their milestone of 100 days worth of ownership, technical ownership from September to end of Jan. I think what you're referring to is probably the fact that they have quite a lot of business within Africa, in the Francophone African territory, so African countries that are majority
Speak
French,
yeah.
So they're wanting to, dub that content into French so that it will have a life in those territories, which is okay. I don't think the local industry doesn't have that much to fear about that. But the real question mark we have now is, what are they going to be spending on local budgets, on local commissioned work? We know that the work I do with the IPO, the Independent Producers Organization, under the BBC, the Black Business Council, we submitted our concerns to the commission, to the Competition Commission, and then they had the tribunal, and our concerns were listed. And one of those concerns is, the level of commissioning budgets, to make sure that they remain the same, to make sure that there aren't significant job losses.
They shouldn't remain the same. They should increase.
They should increase.
They should increase.
They should at least remain the same.
They've now cancelled 2 big local telenovelas, and we all know that in South Africa, since soapies went obsolete, telenovelas are the more sustainable thing, in that you have like 9 months to a year and a half where you've got people working, it's some form of stability. And if those are threatened as well, because the short drama series and other forms of long form and content are not as consistent and constant as we would like them to be.
Yeah, that's true. But it is swings and roundabouts. It's pros and cons on both ways. Canal Plus and their strategy, the Competition Commission said that they need to at least spend the same amount that they have been spending. So they're locked into that, right? The next 3 years, they need to maintain their spending level. It's unclear whether or not, how much of that comes to original programming, like original South African programming, because they've just got like one bulk number and they can spend that on licensing international content, sports rights, news, actuality, AFPs, etc., etc. And, I feel for the Canal Plus guys, because honestly, I think they've bought a lemon, They paid 36 billion rand for a company that's continuously losing premium subscribers and that's got massive competition in this neighborhood. So they have to turn it around. Now, they're not allowed to fire people and they're not allowed to cut their spend budget. So what do? You have to try and rope things in. But that means for us on the local side, there's a lot of inconsistency and consternation around what's going to happen, what's the future of commissions in this country. From an independent producer's point of view, like I've done the volume work thing before. We had a 26-part hour-long drama called High Rollers, which we successfully turned into a daily drama on SABC3. It went from 3 episodes a week to 5 episodes a week. And I was very proud of that. We won a lot of awards, but we got cancelled by the SABC. So I've had a taste of what that feels like and, the profit margin you're able to achieve. And at that volume of work, that margin becomes very slim. It's really difficult. And you're just dealing with human resource things. It's not a very creative space to be in, basically dealing with people being in the same space for like a year and kind of hating each other, we had some funny cases. Anyway, so like from my point of view, I'm more interested in the shorter limited series or feature films, because that gives me an opportunity.
Creative control,
a creative control, but also an opportunity to sit at the equity table. If I'm able to access funding and bring my seat and say, okay, I can fund 25%, then I get 25% equity in that project. So if it's sold into other territories, then that's a way of earning money down the line. But in terms of Canal Plus's their motivation, are they trying to destroy the local industry? No, I don't think so at all. I mean, just listening to the CEO Maxine Sada's comments on various economic platforms, it sounds like he's very gung-ho on the creative engine of Africa. He sees here untapped potential to be a huge creator of content that could be exported into the rest of the world. He looks at streamers, he looks at Shake Lembe, not streamers, sorry, spinners, excuse me, and he sees great potential there, and dubbing that into French, because the French, especially the Parisian French, have this culture of not really wanting to read subtitles. They want to hear their spoken language in French. So that's going to happen anyway. So I'm hopeful that it's going to mean that they can achieve significant cost reductions in shooting in South Africa, because it's much cheaper here to do that.
Speaking of dubbing local productions, it's making me think about now in terms of distribution deals and licensing deals. And in South Africa, there's a lot of 100% commission. There's 2 things I want us to talk about. One, financing a film. They're dubbing local productions because they are a full-on commission. But what that does for the producer, you're not getting any revenue out of the dubbings in all of these other territories. And it's the seeding of your IP, right, where the payer owns your IP. How do we affect change to that? I'm very uncomfortable with that as an independent producer. It makes me hold back a little bit, because this is my IP, right? But also sitting at home with IP that is not bringing you money has no value, but also seeding your rights, and so that you can have whatever you can earn from the production here and now. Once you're done, your paycheck's cut and you're done. The broadcaster can go anywhere with it and you don't have a say?
Yeah, it's a toss-up. There are pros and cons. Just to clarify, SABC is one of the only broadcasters that does actually contractually give rights holders like writers, producers and actors a small piece of exploitation fees. And repeat fees. Now, this is unique because SABC had a lot of pressure on it back in, say, the late 80s, early 90s. There were a lot of groups pressuring them to be more forward-thinking in how they deal with rights holders. So, for example, repeat fees for actors and writers are granted, and they're not to be sniffed at. You know, for a first repeat in a primetime slot, you could receive 25% of what you were originally paid, and then further subsequent repeats are around 15% for actors and writers. And then in terms of exploitation, producers, writers and actors receive a portion of whatever SABC is able to sell the rights of the content to other broadcasters. So they're quite forward-thinking in that regard, and that's helpful. Other broadcasters don't do that, like MultiChoice doesn't do that. Netflix, if they commission the whole thing, they own it and they exploit it to their benefit. If we look at other territories around the world and what they had to do in order to change that, right? So in the UK, say in early 2000s, 2003, there was a big organizational push from PACT, which was the UK producers organisation, and they lobbied government and they said that it's not right, that even though, say, the BBC, a national broadcaster, commissions a piece of content, they should not have all the rights to that content. They should license that content for a period of time in a territory, and the rest of the rights should revert back to the producer, that the producer can exploit.
Ideally what should be happening even here in South Africa with all of the other broadcasters. But for me, the catch-22 is that you shot a pilot. I remember late last year you were doing a pilot, and now you're trying to sell that pilot because you want to recoup the funds that you made and you want to produce it and make it like a full-on situation about it. Now the catch-22 comes at, do you want to hold on to your IP, or we're in a situation where people are losing homes and suffering and losing cars and kids are taken out of school. And if you are facing those challenges, and a broadcaster says to you, here's the budget we have, do this, and now you are in the space where you're like, this versus that. So I feel at some point there is some exploitation of the circumstances. And could it be, or maybe I'm a conspiracy theorist, could it be that the circumstances are engineered on purpose to some extent to be able to enable such things? Because we are like you said earlier, we have very good stories to tell. We are a highly skilled industry in South Africa. We are very creative. We have a lot of social and cultural currency that interprets into our scripts and our stories. South African audiences themselves are a unique set of audiences, right? And we have so much to tell, and we are able to do so much. And if we all stand up and be like, this and this and this and this cannot continue going forward, then we then force all of the other stakeholders to come to power. And I don't know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, I think the argument of, do you hold on to your IP rights or do you sell them for a short-term benefit? That's been around for a long time, and I have an interesting take on it. I think that your IP rights are really worth as much as the market is willing to pay for it. Mm-hmm. And if South Africa keeps producing chairs that only South Africans can sit in, then what is the point of holding on to those rights if you're not able to exploit them elsewhere? I can give a couple examples. So you mentioned the pilot I shot last year. We received some funding from the GFC and from Uncle Cyril from the Presidential Economic Stimulus Program, and we used that money together to shoot a pilot. We were able to shoot for 2 days, and the sole purpose of that pilot is to use it as a piece of bait to try and hook a broadcaster to see the value of what we're trying to do. It was a comedy series called Endless Sunsets, and we haven't been able to hook anyone yet, but we're still in process with some broadcasters. But in the meantime, I've got this piece of content, and how can I exploit this? It was never created for broadcast, so I didn't expect it would actually be, say, the first episode of a real season. But it's there, and with the rise of vertical platforms, I said, okay, maybe we could cut it into smaller segments, and we've chopped it up into 12 little episodes, that 24-minute pilot, and now I'm able to, exploit it. There's a new vertical platform coming called Hectic app, HEKTIC, TIK. And, you know, we're going to put it on there and see what the audience responds to and how they like it. There's a small amount you need to pay to be able to access it. It's not a lot of money. And if it's great and there's a good response, I can take that data and go to investors and say, you know what, the broadcaster didn't want it, but there is an audience watching this. So I can somehow fund the financing plan.
I've seen a lot of producers do that, but on YouTube, because there's been a growing trend of broadcasters picking up content from YouTube, because I feel it opens up like barriers to entry for producers and stuff, because then when it's on YouTube and you have the following and the viewership on YouTube, you have evidence that people are watching this. You go through the comments, you can see people want more of this. I know that there's a series that my guilty indulgence, what's it called? Pop the Balloon. Or Find Love.
That started
with
on
Arlette
YouTube.
It started on YouTube, and it's now, there's a YouTube version and a Netflix version of it.
Yeah.
What's this guy, the streamer that came here recently?
Oh, Speed, I Show Speed.
Yes, he was also picked up from YouTube.
You know, you have to look at the metrics of how they're achieving success. And I Show Speed, you know, he's live streaming every day. He was in Africa for 20 days. He is present. He is showing up on the platform consistently and doing crazy, interesting things, right? So the type of work that I think most of our industry produces, the high quality, good storytelling narratives that we're known for, it's much harder to produce that volume.
Mac G,
Yes.
Podcast and Chill.
There you go.
Locally, they've been also the local broadcasters. They went to, is it Showmix or Mzansi Magic? DSTV. They went
yes.
to DSTV, and SABC2 has picked up King David podcast. I think they're picking up from, because I think, and I support that initiative as producers to say, I'm going to find an audience wherever I find it.
Yeah.
People will engage. Oh, Chris Q, he did Shut Up, Men Are Talking, right? He also shot it as a pilot situation, and then chopped it up into small little pieces for YouTube, and it was doing quite well.
Very well. I enjoyed that a lot.
I hope he got investors so that he can then shoot the whole thing.
Yeah, and that was done well. I mean, it had multiple cameras. It was a very rural
done
location.
very well.
There are a lot of opportunities available to people. I think that the YouTube algorithm rewards consistency and volume. So you need to pitch up, you know, if not at least once a week, maybe more than once a week, dropping content, fresh new content. And, you know, the blogging space really makes it, is flexible enough to handle that. When you've got one person talking to a camera, yes, editing takes a while, but it's nowhere near what we're experiencing with trying to do, like, you know, How to Ruin Christmas or the Netflix type 4 or 5 episode type run. So it's horses for courses. It's not apples with apples. And I think where people are today, you know, if you've got a camera in your pocket like you do, then yes, you can create content and build that audience.
Oh, I hate that. I hate that.
Yes, but it's a way to get yourself out there.
It's a reality, but I hate it with all my heart.
Yeah, look, it's not what I'm interested in. It's not what I'm trying to pursue. My dream goal had always been that, you know, I have my family here in Johannesburg. There are 20 or so of my close family members around me. I wanted to be part of the international film and TV community, but live here and be able to travel to markets around the world, TIFF and Cannes and MIPCOM and the like, and you know, bring projects back to South Africa so that we're bringing dollars and pounds and euros here and benefiting from the exchange rate and benefiting from the rebates we're able to offer to these different productions, building your finance plan like that. I did one of those shoots called Safari Romance, which is a romantic comedy for Hallmark, and it's screened in Hallmark in the States. And that was a great experience. I really enjoyed that. There was an international co-production between South Africa and Canada, and me as the South African producer, I have a small piece of that pie. So as it gets sold into other territories around the world, then I'll continue to benefit from that.
I've realized that broadcasters locally, they don't, even international ones, right? They don't give us as much freedom and control over the production as they do with international productions, right? I'm gonna roll back to Chris Q, right? Chris has casted who he has casted for Shut Up, Men Are Talking, he's worked with crew that he has worked with on the promise that Magents, Masnemali, when we get money, we'll do this. And I presume that's also the kind of conversations you were having with your people when you were trying to produce the...
Endless Sunsets, yeah.
Exactly. And now you get picked up by a broadcaster, and they go to the extent of wanting to choose crew, the commissioning editor choosing crew.
Yeah.
I find that it stifles the process.
Look, I think you'll find, say, Chris Q perhaps might have that challenge, but I don't know, someone like Mantle N or the guys from Tsetsa Pictures who have
I'm talking, it's an experience I've had.
Okay, well,
regardless of who the production company is, CEs will want to approve. If they don't want to approve the entire crew, they want to approve at least your HOTs, which I feel that's a producer's sole situation.
Yeah.
We can understand with the casting, right? Somewhere there, but just because a person, and that sponsors the phenomenon where you find one person, one actor is now the favorite child at broadcaster A, and they are on everything that's on broadcaster A. Whereas we've got so much other talent. Sometimes the person is not even fitting for the role that you are being made to cast them.
Yeah, look, I think it's different for, say, commission-based projects. When Netflix is funding the whole thing, then yes, it's a big investment they're making, many millions of rands worth, and they do unfortunately have the say. But it's the relationship you're building with them. My experience with Netflix, I just finished a film with them. We delivered it on Friday, and
well done.
yeah, thank you very much. And they were very open to our. They said, it's your show, you run it. They in fact didn't call us once during shoot, but that's a different type of model. That's a license. So
give me your bathwater. I want to bath with your bathwater.
No, they were a little bit more flexible, and we had to present to them, and we do a deep dive presentation so that they can see very clearly we know what we're doing, and we're not just flying by the seat of our pants, that we have a plan of action, and this is the people we're working with, and all of them are, extensively vetted. But then they let us do our thing, and they didn't bother us too much because it's a license. It's a softer touch for them. It's not...
It's a licensing deal, yeah.
Exactly.
It's not a full commission.
Correct, yeah. But we used that licensing fee. The majority of it was our budget, And it's a small film. It's a rom-com. We shot it in our neighborhood in Linden, in Johannesburg. It's an Afrikaans film. So it's a relatively low risk for them. But if you're shooting something like... what is Fatal Seduction, that's a massive investment for them, and then yes, they're going to want to control every aspect of it. Commissioning editors are like any bosses, right? You have to deal with them. You're never going to get somebody who, okay, here's multiple millions of rands, you can do whatever you like. You have to answer to someone where the money comes from. The bean counters.
Little pop quiz.
Yeah.
In your opinion, between Netflix versus Mzansi Magic versus SABC versus ETV, who would you say has more confidence in South African producers?
Sure, that's an interesting question, hey? I think Mzansi Magic have shown that they really believe in local content. I see them continuously commissioning the same people over and over. So is that a marker of confidence in the rest of the industry? Not really. I see that ETV also kind of stick to their stable of people, but are a little bit more open to making the circle bigger. SABC, not really doing much right now. And if you take the risk of working with SABC, there's the constant sword hanging over your head. Are they going to pay? Am I going to be able to pay my suppliers, my cast, my crew? Is it going to be another story like what's happened so many times in the past, where SABC crews have gone without food? So then it comes to Netflix. I do think Netflix are keenly interested in African talent and African producers, African storytellers, and are open to making that circle big and looking for new voices. But Netflix can do 10 or 12 original things a year. That's it. That's not enough to sustain an industry.
But also we can't all depend on Netflix. I stay saying there's SABC, there's Netflix, there's MultiChoice, then there's ETV, and they're just four of them.
Exactly. Too many sellers, not enough buyers.
And then there's 5 million producers.
Yeah.
There's not enough. We need to open more avenues, like the app you were talking about, like YouTube. We need to open more platforms and spread it out so that at least we can't accommodate all 5 million of us, but there's more work, there's more flow of like space to be creative and to express ourselves.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think YouTube, and the big question over like, is YouTube TV? I think that's been pretty successfully answered in that, you know, this latest stats that came out at the end of 2025, in that more Americans watch YouTube on their television than they do on their cell phone or their laptops. And so there is a strong shift in culture towards consuming YouTube content as through a TV linear broadcast situation. So YouTube is TV for all intents and purposes. Now we know that trends take a while to filter down to our market, but that's coming. It's in the post, and we got to get ready for it. So I think, you know, it's only a matter of time until TikTok enters that space and wants to dominate the household TV screen, and we better
TikTok
be ready.
is currently dominating the vertical space.
Yes, well, vertical dramas.
I've watched a lot of K-dramas on when they keep repeating the same scene and you have to go search, where's the next part? It's annoying. But
what you're talking about is a very interesting trend, because there is such a huge churn of content in that vertical drama space. Yes, it is definitely a growing market. We're seeing the beginning of it start in Africa, and I think when, you know, hopefully when internet penetration reaches a more stable level and it's not as expensive for data and more people have access to cell phones, or you know, when there's actually original content being produced for that vertical format, not just reversioned 16:9 content that's just been cut into the vertical 9:6 format, then we're going to start to see interesting things happen. That's why I'm interested about this Hectic app. I think it's I think it's fascinating, you know, and I see a trend in Asia and in India and in China that they churn through this stuff so quickly. They're looking for new content, right? They're looking for diverse content. So there is a market for African stories in that marketplace. In fact, a friend of mine, Terika Sutu from Both Worlds Productions, the guy did, you know, Zar News, the puppets Zar News,
yes.
But you know, he pivoted very successfully towards Recipes for Love and Murder on MultiChoice, the morning after. So he's recently come back from a vertical conference, a big conference in Singapore, where they're talking about all the latest trends. And, you know, you've got distributors looking for vertical content into that Asian audience and are interested in African stuff. And so what he did was shoot, you know, he brainstormed 5 ideas, and out of the top 2 out of those, he shot pilots for, and he managed to edit 2.5-minute episodes, 20 of them, as a proof of concept, and show it to these distributors and say, okay, if you like it, then buy the license, give me an MG, uses that money to shoot the rest of the 70 to 80 to 90 episodes you require for that episode order. That is a real business model, you know, that makes sense. And it's not breaking the bank. You're not shooting a, say, 40-minute pilot episode or a feature film. Who knows who's going to distribute it? You're targeted, and the volume of episodes you need to shoot is not impossible.
We've been mentioning a lot of commissioning, licensing, whatever. For the student at varsity who's still studying producing, or for the person who does not know, what does a licensing deal entail, and what does a commissioning deal entail?
Okay, well, perhaps I can best explain it by just kind of unpacking my story, because I started as an actor. I studied clowning, literally. I have an honors degree as a clown from AFDA.
You don't say.
Yeah. My advice to kind of new entrants into the marketplace as an actor, like, I didn't want to sit around waiting for the phone call. I wanted to be the one making the phone call. And in order for that to happen, you had to take some risks. And I put my own money up. You know, the group of us who started City Sesla, Bantla, Tumi, Marin, myself, Josh, we all put in, you know, a little bit of cash to make this pilot. And that paid off really well. But sometimes it won't. And maybe it'll take the second or the third or the fourth pilot to really pay off. But having a tangible piece of evidence to say, this is what I'm trying to achieve, is helpful, but not absolutely necessary. Nowadays, there are requests for proposals that are posted on the different, you know, portals. MultiChoice has a submission portal you should check every now and then. They put up a a request for proposal. SABC, not so much. ETV, there's only an email address you can send your stuff to. Netflix, if you can have a connection there, good luck. You send it off into the ether.
Well, you're my connection to Netflix now.
Yeah, well, they're a tough crowd to get their attention because, they've got however many thousand people kind of grabbing, lots of emails coming through. And so it's hard for them to just sift through all of that.
Many an idea has died because people do not have money. Great stories that could have been hits had they seen the light of day, right? What about those people? How, and this will come in also into government funding, right? Is that, for example, NFVF, the presidential
economic stimulus program,
yes, that one. They give you the money that they give you. Then there's no follow-up. They don't. You project how you're going to sell this, you do all of those documents, the distribution plans, your marketing plans, your projected ROIs and all of that, but they don't monitor and evaluate that now that we've given you this money, how are we getting this money back? And I feel if there was those metrics to measure that, okay, GFC is giving you money, NFVF is giving you money, DSEC is giving you money, DTIC is giving you money, how is this money being made back? What are the timelines for this money to come back so that all of that profits, there's a profit. Right now, we're doing it it feels like we're doing it because we can, right? The business model behind it is not as strengthened as it should be, because I feel like if you got, let's say, 500K to do a pilot from PESP, then when you do get a distribution deal or a licensing deal from that, some of that money should be injected back into the coffers so that they can reinvest that money to somebody else.
Yeah, I think that's interesting what you raised there, Z. I think that it's important to understand the different categories and what their purpose is. So the NFVF, the National Film and Video Foundation, its sole mandate is around development of the industry. So they sponsor, tuition for AFTRA students or for film students and art students. They run programs like the Sidiba program for scriptwriters and for producers, and they do a lot of workshops around the country to try and raise awareness around distribution, around film education, audience development, etc., etc. So they are an important kind of starting block for entrance into the industry. And those funds, I think when we start to put the burden of having to recoup those funds on the NFVF, then that's, in my opinion, a mistake. That should be developmental funding that's poured into the industry to hope to lift people up. To 25,000 to go to a local film festival, 50,000 to go to an international film festival. If you get your paperwork right and you hand everything in correctly, so there's a purpose for that. Now, when you talk about the DTIC, and before I get there, PESP, the Presidential Employment Stimulus Program, I think it's called, which runs through the NFVF, is really about job creation. So it's money and funding that you can add towards an existing project that you're going to be able to only spend on jobs, like local South African jobs. So that's its mandate. It's not mandated to return that money in any form of ROI. Now, perhaps that's a mistake, and the NFVF should be more economically viable.
It should be more economically viable so that they can develop more. But there's been a lot of talk in the industry where the same productions are being given money by the NFVF. And this is not exclusive to the NFVF. You mentioned earlier how the broadcasters will give the same productions over. And I've had an experience with a broadcaster, with a CE, that cancelled the production that I was proposing, and it was going well until we had to go to a hotel, and I was like, no, sir, we ain't gonna do that. And it got cancelled. I'm not accusing anyone who is being commissioned of doing that, but it is a thing that we all know. Nobody comes about and talk about it, and I'm speaking to my personal experience where the person literally said to me, because you are refusing to go to bed with me, you are not going to.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
And they said it in Sotho, which it sounded, for the people that speak Sotho, but say, I can't now hana ka sebunu, o ka se ithole contract. Do you know how vile that sounds?
I can only imagine. And
Do you know, and a lot of people have had those experiences, but nobody talks about it. The NFVF has also been accused of giving their friends and their favorites the same money over, the same people money over, and they don't, when they do slates where they give one production company, they don't open it to new talent, but which for me feels like that's going against their mandate. If their mandate is to develop, why are we not giving up and coming and emerging producers slates so that they can learn? And for me, if you say you want to be a producer, right, and I say to you, here's 50,000. Go do your podcast, for example. If you want to do a podcast, here's 50,000. Go do your podcast. And then I don't come back to you and be like, you've shot your podcast. These are the things that you had to think about before going to a podcast. Have you implemented? You're not learning anything. It's enabling a give me
society.
attitude in society, which perhaps that's also who has access to funds is what dictates what gets out there. Because we are in this attitude, you want to be given, because we're not developing independent producers that can go and sell their project, that can say, if I have money and it's my personal money and I'm giving you this money because you want to shoot a pilot, then you can say to me, you'll get your money back in a year. And because you've done it before, I've seen with NFVF giving you money to go do that, and there's no, it feels like it enables, I don't know what the term that...
Well, I think what you're referring to are like gatekeepers, right?
Yeah.
And how the industry is plagued by gatekeeping. And first of all, I'm so sorry to hear that about what happened to you and the proposition that you were made. And I know it's hard, but whoever is hearing this, it has happened to them as well, I cannot encourage you more to come forward with that. And now we are in a time zone where I feel like, the next few years are going to be marked by an attack on corruption in our industry. We have got to expose and bring to the light and bring to the fore people who are corrupt, who use their leverage and their position to hold back and to give to the few and not to the many. And yes, there are people who keep getting commissioned, but is it their fault, or are they really good at answering the briefs? That's another question. Are they going to
hotel rooms?
Or they go into hotel rooms. I can talk for my experience, right? And I have been on panels with the NFVF where they adjudicate certain productions, and all I've ever witnessed is complete transparency and very open-handedness about, well, this is how the money is supposed to move. Who knows what happens beyond that point? But the adjudication process of like, this is how the project is scored, and there's a good project, there's a bad project. It's a fierce debate amongst the panelists, and hopefully the best rises to the surface. Beyond that, I can't speak to more than that. But I know that what we're currently experiencing with the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition is a serious case of maladministration.
It is.
And I know you're going to get into that with some of your other guests, but I wanted to touch on it briefly, because how do we as independent producers manage to piece together the finance plan? Well, a huge part of that has always been this incentive program. It's been running since 2004. Back then, in the world, there were only 6 different incentive programs around the world. 6 different countries that were running incentive programs. So South Africa was incredibly,
forthcoming and forward-thinking
exactly,
about it.
Forward-thinking.
And now it's become politicized.
Well, now there are more than 120 different territories around the world that offer very competitive, very great incentive schemes in the form of tax rebates, in the form of cash rebates, tax credits, etc., etc. So it's so much more competitive out there that South Africa, if you don't have this tax credit or tax rebate system that functions properly, it becomes that much more expensive to come and shoot in your country. If I'm going to rather go to Portugal or Malta or Australia or wherever, yes, there'll be costs involved in that, but I have this guarantee that this amount of money is coming back to me. And that means a lot these days. International co-production is a huge piece of the international filmscape. And And, you know, ours hasn't been functioning. The last 2 years, we've had no new projects approved, and we really are not going to accept it. We've pushed back hard. We organised marches on the 28th and 29th. We had marches in Cape Town and Pretoria. And as a result of that, we got a portfolio committee meeting last week, Tuesday, with Parliament and the DTIC. The minister was there, deputy ministers, both of them were there, the DG, the DDG.
Look, I watched the stream of that, and I was quite shaky about how about the recognition of the value in terms of our economic contribution to the GDP and all of that. I was very shaky about how much they recognize the value of what we do.
Yeah.
What was your feeling?
I think it's summed up in the disconnect between government and private industry, where they still refer to this as a grant, and we've referred to it as an incentive. Now, the difference between the two doesn't sound like much, but a grant is a discretionary payment it's kind of like, it's much more of free money, like the NFVF
is
grants, right?
Yeah.
And some of those grants require you to pay the money back. Others are, free, like basically tax-free payments to you. But an incentive is in return for services rendered and in response or in expectation of some sort of economic value that you're bringing to the party. Countries around the world have film incentives because they recognize the incredible multiplier effect that those industries bring. Every $1 or dollar a government pays towards a film incentive, they receive They receive at least R5 back in various forms of economic activity, all the way downstream: petrol, hotel rooms, flights, accommodation, etc.
Exactly, we affect so many other industries. We've got catering, we've got the tourism industry, we've got gear houses, we've got accommodation, we've got toll gates, we've got fuel. There's so much that we contribute to.
Yeah, roughly 60% of a film's budget goes to non-screen specific activity. So stuff that doesn't make it onto the screen.
Flights, accommodation, food,
exactly,
vehicle hiring,
and
all of that.
There's so many pros to it. It's a majority youth employer. So most of the people on a film set are under the age of 35. It's a majority woman employer. Most of the people on the film set, like I look at us today, and I think I'm one of two guys here, you know. So most of our industry is dominated by females and young people, and it has the unique ability to activate foreign direct investment almost immediately. When you say the DTI,
it is very open to skills. You can get a person who has never set foot on set and show them how to do, show them the ropes, train them up, and they flourish.
Exactly, semi-skilled and no-skilled people are absorbed into the industry very quickly. And, it's a great advertisement for South Africa to the rest of the world. Who hasn't wanted to go to, Dubrovnik because of Game of Thrones, or, Paris because of Emily in Paris? Like, these shows, are a postcard to the world for our country.
They show us what is happening. They show the world what is happening in the country and where the people are.
That piece of financing is so important and becomes a huge leverage stick. That's how I was able to piece together the financing for my film Safari Romance, because I've got a Canadian producer who he has got the connection to Hallmark, right? So he's got the license from Hallmark. He's also got a connection to another broadcaster in Canada, and he's going to get a license to Canada. He's looking for another territory around the world that he can get soft money from, as well as a sale into another broadcaster. Like, I'm not great at marketing and distributing. I'm very good at, managing the relationship with the broadcaster, the money people, finding the money, piecing it together, getting everyone to the starting point, and then go and make the thing. And then after the fact, now how do we sell the thing? How do you exploit it? Where do you take it to? That comes down to deep-seated relationships you've built over many years. So I know a guy in Germany who's looking for African content. Oh, great. I'm going to have a direct conversation with him. Now, if I were to go through a distributor, I'd be relying on that distributor to have that relationship with him. And sometimes he's got 50 other titles he needs to sell. So he's only going to go to that guy once he's got 10 or so titles that fit this description, and he can bundle it together. And sometimes that's to your benefit, where you'll actually get more of a sale price because you're dealing with volume. Other times, it's just stuff sitting on the shelf. And you, as the lonely producer...
I know a lot of would-be producers who have features and series sitting on hard drives. It's a sad state of affairs.
Yeah, and especially, you know, with the Canal Plus sale, the licensing to MultiChoice has really hit a massive halt. I hope it's going to reopen, but
let's hope.
Yeah, there haven't been local sales for licensed content to MultiChoice for about 18 months now.
MultiChoice as an entity was not very big on licensing. They were very big on 100% commission. Yes, this is what I wanted us to talk about before I let you go. The difference between licensing and commission.
Sure. Traditionally, a broadcaster like SABC or MultiChoice, where they pay, they put out a request for proposal, an RFP document saying, on Mzansi Magic, we want a drama series about crime, and we wanted to tick this target audience, and here's some descriptors of what we're interested in, and they put it out to the marketplace, and sometimes it's a closed brief, or sometimes it's an open brief. If it's an open brief, you get a lot of people responding. If it's a closed brief, you just send it to a couple few, lucky few, and you submit your proposal and with a budget, and then they sift through them and the best ones, then you come and pitch for it, and at the end of the day they appoint you, and then they give you the money. They give you the money to develop it, to write the scripts, and to produce it. And they own 100% of that piece of content then. You don't have any ownership of that right, and if it's MultiChoice, you don't get repeat fees.
Your earnings are only limited to what you pay yourself from the budget that you get from the production, and keep it to
There are 4 ways to make money in this industry. There's the production fee you can pay yourself. There's services you render to the production itself, so executive producer, director, writer, whatever it is. There is equipment you can rent to the production, and then there's exploitation if you own any IP in the actual production.
With 100% commission, you don't own any IP, unfortunately.
Yes, but it's like I said. For example, the pilot I just shot, In the Sunset, our target there is not to own. I'm happy to sell that IP because I need some bread and butter work to come through. So I'm happy for that to be a 13-part commission because I think
I was talking about earlier that you need money now.
Exactly.
The rent is due now. Let's sell the IP. We'll be fine.
Yes, but there's a bigger series that I'm working on that I need to piece together the money, and for doing all of that and developing it myself, I've got to hold on to at least a piece of that IP so that when I sell it elsewhere overseas,
you can get some.
I can get some, yes. The tricky bit comes in which broadcasters are open to that level, that model. What we're talking about there is now licensing. So you are going to a broadcaster or a streamer and saying, okay, here's my idea. This is what I think it is going to look like. And you're trying to get a pre-sale from them. Now, pre-sales will always be less than, say, a license after the fact. If you, for example, produce the whole series and you bring it to them and say, this is what it looks like, you're probably going to get a better price than if you haven't done it yet and you're selling it on spec to them. And they give you a pre-sale contract to say, okay, I'm going to license this at $20,000 an episode. You take that paper, that money, you can either cash flow it from a bank, or you can use it, piece it together, and go to other places to get other investors, other territories around the world that haven't yet been sold or licensed to. So I go to France and I go to Canada and I make sales into those territories, and then I'm able to piece together my full budget. Now, say Africa, because Netflix wants it for Africa, France and Canada are sold, but the rest of the world is available. So when I make the thing, then I know I'm targeting, say, the UK or Australia or USA or South America, wherever it is. So you've got to keep that in mind with your piece of content. Now, that is a much harder game to play.
It is, and it's the long game. It's the long game. It's not the let's get paid now kind of game, because...
And the real tricky bit is, sorry to interrupt you, but Netflix, for example, have this hyper-local attitude. They only want content that is going to get them more subscribers in this territory. Their measure of success is how many subscribers are in South Africa.
Locally,
So if your show does, gangbusters in, say, South Korea, that's a nice to have, but it's not successful according to them. They need to spend their budget on local subscribers. That's why when you go to them with a show that says, oh, there's a French actor in it and there's some interest from Canada, not that they don't care, they actively refuse those kind of works because they want only their local audience to watch this stuff, which I think is very short-sighted.
It is.
Yeah.
Look, you can tell an authentically South African story, but cater to broader audiences, like worldwide audiences. The world is interested in South Africa. We see this in the Amapiano. Everybody and their uncles now trying to dance like a South African dancer. Shaka Ilembe is doing well internationally, even though they're speaking pure Zulu and they're reading the subtitles, it's doing well. There's interest in what we do. And like you said, it's very short-sighted to want to limit it to here. But we don't know what their mandate and what their corporate strategy is, so we can't really get into it. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when you're dealing with a Netflix or any client, any source of funds, it's important to understand what is their what is important to them. So for Netflix, they have this hyper-local angle, but for MultiChoice, they view international co-productions as kind of a golden standard. We think about Reika, we think about Catch Me a Killer, about a number of these projects that have been pieced together. White Lies is another, White Lies. And so it's satisfying a local audience, but there's one international piece to it. Like, for example, White Lies had that lady from Game of Thrones, I forget her name right now. And so it can make sales into the rest of the world. So that is a fantastic market for a person like me who's trying to make an international co-production, but those projects are like already, those slots are filled up till 2029, you know?
Yeah.
It's very difficult to make inroads there. And it's making a big risk, so they don't want something necessarily, they don't want to take a chance on a piece of original content. They would rather have IP, like a book or a story that already exists in the audience's mind that you can create the story from. So it's a challenge. And if we don't have our incentives in place, it makes it that much harder.
Do you ever think about becoming a broadcaster? And if no, why? And if yes, why?
Like a podcaster or
no, broadcaster as in have your own SABC, if I can say that. And Luke Rouse Studios.
No, I have never thought of that. I was in the volume game with High Rollers, like I said, and it was not a very creatively fulfilling time. I think when you're dealing with broadcasting, I remember speaking to a commissioning editor, and she's like, all I want is talking, moving pictures on screen. That's what she needs to fill the airtime. And I would hate to be stuck in that space. I think with the rise of VODs at the moment, making a curated VOD platform, something like Letterboxd or a Mubi, focusing on a hyper-specific target audience, and not being everything to everybody like a Netflix, because those markets have already been cornered. But offering something unique, that's super interesting about South Africa, because our audiences still respond to local content, right? It's the one thing keeping MultiChoice relevant. The Mzansi Magic, local Nguni language content, and surprisingly Afrikaans content on CakeNet, because those premium viewers are paying the highest tiered rate, and they do it for Afrikaans stuff, and they are incredibly loyal. They don't change the channel, they just keep it on that. And they complain bitterly, but they keep watching it. So I would be, focused.
That's the truth with all the audiences. People have been complaining about generations that do, but they still watch it.
Yeah. I'd be interested to see what the revamp of SABC2 looks like, how it actually materializes. I know they've got what they call a brown soap opera that's coming on now for the Afrikaans audience called Paradise.
I've seen it, yeah.
Yeah.
It looks interesting. I've seen the trailers and I'm like, okay, this looks interesting.
It does. It seems to me that they're going for kind of the lowest common denominator, because it's still that stereotypical gangster storylines around the Cape Flats, or I'm actually not sure where it's set, but it felt like there was a lot of kind of violence.
Please do not tempt me, because that's one of my pet peeves. But that conversation, I'm talking to somebody about telling our own stories from our own point of view.
Yeah.
Me and you can't get into that, otherwise we will not finish.
Okay.
It'll be the whole day. What I've observed with the broadcasters, all of them, all of the local ones, is that the story must look the same. There's a successful black family, or whoever, white family, then there's the clown of the story, then the successful people have some element of gangsterism and corruption. It can never be just you're genius and you're diligent, and there must be corruption, and then there must be fighting of some sort. It either is infighting in the family, or this family A fighting with family B, then the stories all look and sound the same. But let's not go into it because we will talk about it until...
I have a brief comment on that. I think, it's interesting to contrast like the rise of AI and how AI, when you submit a question to AI, you're not getting the best answer. You're getting the average answer because there are so many inputs coming into it all the time, and so you're getting the kind of middle of the road, or let's say lowest common denominator answer. And so I see a similar contrast when we look at South African broadcasting, that we're not getting the unique, incredibly beautifully designed and very unique stories at the top band. When you're making an investment that costs multiple millions of rands, you want to try and hit the target that's going to get the most possible audience. And over here, it's groundbreaking and award-winning, but not a lot of people are watching it, and so they're aiming at the middle band at the lowest common denominator.
On the special occasions where they allow the producer to go unique and niche, we've seen audiences like, yes, we want to see this. Because there's a lot of moral decay. There's a lot of moral decay in our stories, gangsterism, crime, all of that. Like, oh Lord, we have better, and we've become a better society in South Africa. Yes, there's still subtle things, racism and all of that, but it's not as pronounced. And I cannot sit down one more time and watch a story, white people versus black people. I can't stomach it.
But I think you ask yourself, where was the training ground for people to kind of experiment with that storytelling? And it was the SABC. I grew up through the SABC. I mean, I used to know that building backwards, right? Where to get this thing signed off, where to speak to that person. And
I still do.
Yeah, well, the Yizos and the Chachas and the Mziniwe Sizwas and the City Seslas and all of those, that was this training ground for people who had never done it before, who were giving it a risk. With City Sesla, there was another show that was supposed to be in our time slot, and they cancelled it. And they said to us, can you be on air in 3 months' time? We had no experience, we had none of the scripts written, and we said, yes, absolutely. So we got to working incredibly fast. But that would never happen.
I have a problem with, where it takes a year, on average in South Africa, it will take you about 2.5 years to 3 years between ideation and being on screen. And that has reduced. It used to be 5 to 6, 7 years. It has reduced significantly because of other mitigating factors, technology, access and all of that. It has now reformed. But like, you are negotiating with and presenting back and forth with Channel about this program, and then they tell you TX in September. Okay, cool. Then they give you the money to go shoot in June. Like,
yeah, look, I miss the days of TX, because now you deal with the Netflix folks and they're like, no, don't worry about that. And it's just forever and ever and ever. Things delay and delay and delay. It's better to have a deadline. People work incredibly hard with a gun to their head, actually. And good work comes out of that with you put the right amount of pressure on. Obviously, the SABC now is, not sticking to deadlines whatsoever. So it becomes manic. But I think, just having it open-ended is not a good recipe.
How do we reform the SABC? How, as producers, right? How do we help the SABC to become better and more stable? And what reforms are needed for the industry as a whole?
I think you need to get some great people back there. And I have seen some very talented people return. Mai Zhang, Mpuera is...
Oh, Mai Zhang is back. That's crazy.
Returned. He returned in August last year. Lala Tuku obviously is still a stalwart, and I love seeing Lala because every time there's a new show there, Lala's in the front getting her press pics taken. But she's genuinely a dedicated TV professional. And so we've got to see the sharp, experienced minds coming back in the executive level management. Then there's a big disconnect, I find, between the executive management and the board. Because the board, for example, my bugbear with SABC is that they're like a dragon sitting on a big treasure trove. They've got all of this IP that they've developed and paid millions of rands for over the years, but they're not using it. And free up some of those IPs. And that comes from the board members saying, no, this is our cultural heritage. We're not going to license that. You can't touch that. But hey, guys, you don't have a lot of things going on now. So free it up and let us take it and represent it and find other funders to come on board and make another version of, say, Yizo or City Sesla or whatever. Then you need money. You need lots and lots of money to run a national broadcaster with 3 channels and however many radio stations, 17, 18 radio stations.
Is it a parastate or a fully state-owned entity, SABC?
It is a private company, but here's the tricky bit.
Wait a minute. The national broadcaster is
Yes.
a private company.
SABC Pty Limited is a shareholder of the Minister of DCDT, so Digital Communication and the Department of Communication and Digital Technology. Okay, this is the problem with our industry. There are 3 different ministries that we fall under: DSAC, Sports, Arts and Culture; DCDT, and the DTIC. And we often fall in the cracks there. So the Minister of the DCDT is the shareholder of Minister of Communications of the SABC. Now, SABC do not have enough money coming in. And yes, there's way too much money going out, and we need to figure that out.
It rolls back to what I was saying earlier, that there's not much monitoring and evaluation of how the money is spent and coming back.
Yes.
You know.
Well, they've also had huge knock on their ad revenue spend because people aren't watching it as much. They're watching Netflix, they're watching MultiChoice, etc., etc. But on the 6th of February, the minister announced a new funding program, funding mechanism, after there being a study, etc., etc. And I think what's going to result is a levy. So there'll be a levy. Its implementation is up to be seen how that's going to happen. But I think the South African taxpayer is probably going to have to pay to fund the SABC.
Oh, Lord. Look, it's surprising for me that SABC is a private company, seeing as how much it is used as a political tool.
Look, I might have gotten that wrong. Let me stand under correction, but I know that there is some level of independence within the SABC, but obviously it is an SOE, a state-owned enterprise, and it does need to answer to the government. I remember when Cloudy was having his reign of terror over there, he kept on harping on about how they only receive a very small percentage of their budget from the state, and actually they shouldn't be, they carry a huge mandate.
But Cloudy was onto something. I'll credit him in that he was advocating for 90% of local creative currency and then import the 10%. Whereas currently, even in his time, we consume a lot of content that comes from outside.
There's a reason behind that, though. We consume outside content because it's cheaper. Licensing content is obviously much cheaper than producing it, and they didn't have the money to produce it. And okay, he went that experiment down the road, and this is where we landed up. SABC's.
I think if he had gotten the support and been given the chance, perhaps our industry would not be in the swamp that it is in right now. Everywhere where there's manufacturing across the board, where there's factories, we will assume being on set and shooting local productions is a factory. There's more employment and more economic stability. Where, look at China. China is a manufacturing country, and China has all the money for everything, and when South Africa had factories, after used to be a coffee factory, when South Africa had factories here, there was a lot of employment, and then they moved out the factories. If we have factories for film and television here, our industry wouldn't suffer as much as it is suffering right now. That's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
Oh, I hear you. I think it's an interesting take. I haven't heard a defense of Cloudy in a very long time, so that's fascinating. I think you'll find some interesting comments coming up on this YouTube clip. But look, I think he did a lot of damage to the SABC, and he hasn't recovered properly. And they've tried, the SABC Plus model. They've tried, but just suffered for a long time. And I hope getting more money into the system is going to be an answer to turn around local production, because we need it. Let's see what the SABC2 relaunch looks like by the end of the year, and then hopefully they can move on to S3.
I hope they are restructuring and is not going to be the bill of the taxpayer. Taxpayers are already paying for way too much, especially us. Our tax is 25% to 30%. That's a lot of money that we pay in taxes.
Yeah. I think the levy would be probably a very small percentage on an individual basis, and would not be applicable.
From experience, they should know that making the public pay for SABC from the TV licensing situation, it did not work.
Yeah.
It's still. I heard they're gonna just cancel that whole thing now.
Well, it's at 85% people not paying their TV
People
licenses.
are not gonna do that.
Yes. Well, a levy against anybody who has the capacity to watch TV through a TV set.
Then why am I watching SABC and I'm not going buying my data and go and watch YouTube?
Well, that's what they
Why
want
am
to say.
I not paying my subscription
They're going to charge the
Amazon
levy.
and Netflix and
They're charging the levy against those broadcasters like Netflix, YouTube, Amazon, TikTok, etc.
That move for me, it feels like what the DTIC is doing in dragging their feet with the incentive, right? It feels they're hampering, because now Netflix does not have to be in South Africa. They're here because they want to, because there's opportunity. And now if they're going to be charged fees and levies, what's going to make them be like, adios muchachos?
Yeah. It's not so
Amazon
much,
already packed up and left.
It's not so much the Netflix in Africa, but it's the precedent it would set for Netflix around the world. If they accept this in South Africa, then they'll have to do it in other broadcasters,
worldwide.
and they would never accept that. So look, how it gets implemented is a tricky one, but something needs to happen, because personally, my opinion, I think SABC should just pack up and be sold for parts. What's the point of it? I don't see any value in it whatsoever.
So.
I don't watch SABC. When last did you watch an
SABC.
SABC news broadcast? When last did you watch a weather broadcast?
I watched it after the march because I was on the news.
I think
I watched for selfish reasons.
It's important for our majority audience who doesn't have access to that reliable.
There's people, however, I was at home after I lost my house and I had to go back. When you were calling me about the pilot, you were looking for a line producer about the pilot.
Yes.
I was at home in the village.
Yeah.
I had gone home because I needed to just husa, right, and just take a breath and calm down and then start afresh. In the villages, there's places in my village. I know that at home, in my mother's house, we pay, is it like, I think it's a 100 and something rand once off to DSTV so that we can have stable SABC. And there's people who do not have access to that DSTV situation, who the only channels they have access to is SABC. And sometimes not even all of SABC, just SABC 1 or SABC 2,
and now that they've
depending
switched
on
off
where they are.
the broadcast, the terrestrial broadcast, even more people have less access.
And this is why I don't really respect the audience, the ARs from SABC, because they're not true. Those people that are watching those programs are watching because that's the only thing they have.
I was on an
access
SABC
to.
panel, an AR panel. They take a small segment of the population, 1,000 people, and measure your viewing habits as a marker for the rest of the audience. And I didn't think that's a good idea.
It's not truthful.
Yeah.
A person who consumes content in Johannesburg is not doing it the same way as Umto Semangwane.
No, but obviously they take households in the different countries, pieces around the country. Look, SABC's problems are deep and varied. I'm kind of tongue-in-cheek in saying that I think it should be sold for parts. I don't see the value in it, but I'm not in the Free State somewhere without access to internet and only have this one source of news and entertainment in SABC. And it is a different market, and I recognize there's a desperate need for something there. And until internet penetration comes to a point where it's accessible enough, then SABC does have a.
Look, we can't even guarantee that our tax money will resuscitate or save the SABC. So
you know what? I have something to say on that, because I was for a long time, I had that same view of like, well, the taxes aren't being used properly. I don't know where it's going. It's all corrupt, blah, blah, blah. Until I got into this DTIC situation of like actually digging deep, rolling up my sleeves, making the phone calls, saying, hey, your thing was repudiated. Did you have a signed thing? Show it to me. Collecting 30, 40 different companies worth of repudiations and doing the hard on-the-ground work and realizing the intricacy and the depth of the maladministration and actually I can make a difference. Then I called up my local government representative and said, hey, do you know about this problem? He said, no, I had no idea. We got together and we met. I explained the whole thing to him. And he's like, hey, man, I'm going to represent this in Parliament. I'm part of the portfolio committee. You should come and march outside there. Oh, we're organizing a march in Pretoria. Okay, we'll do it in Cape Town as well. And all of a sudden, the small kind of interpersonal investigation into a massive problem in our
a
industry.
bigger problem,
You know,
yeah.
people take ownership for it. And a lot of people complain, but not a lot of people actually do the hard work. So my message to South Africa is, if you see
the work.
a problem, if you want to make a difference, get out there, make the phone calls, build a case, get involved with local industry, local organizations, the IPO, SASFID, IBFC, Sage, Saga. There's a whole bunch of them in the entertainment field. If you're not part of that representation, then you don't have a right to complain, I say.
Yeah. Look, not defending people that do not take action, but earlier we talked about people coming forward with victimization and all of that. Our industry, we've seen a lot of people being blacklisted, people making sure that because you ousted them, you don't work. But we are hoping that people will gain more confidence and come out more, and that people will start putting in the work. It doesn't help to complain about things passively without doing the work, but also there's so much that people can in actuality do.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think get involved, become an active member, and like I said, I think this year and the years to come are going to be known for corruption busting. We have got to see some big arrests coming from the Matlanga Commission. We've got to see some top dogs. I mean, we have a history of, you remember Sheikh, what's his name? The guy who was the financial manager for Jacob Zuma, who went to jail. Shabir Sheikh, and now he's playing golf and he's sitting pretty old. He was supposed to be dead however many years ago. You know, that's the history we have to point towards. We need a different story, a different narrative. We need our officials and our judiciary to hold the people to account and for there to be real consequences. And I'm trusting we're going to get that. And I'm on my little, horse riding this thing and determined to see positive change and positive results from this investigation into the DTIC officials.
There needs to be a reform. There needs to be proper consequences. We can't make all of this noise and take all of this action for nothing, for it to result in naught. It would have been a wasted effort.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be wasted. And the trick about the incentive scheme is that it's a way to build value for my children and for your children to come, because that product, that intellectual property, becomes concentrated into an actual product that you can sell when you're sleeping. You know, my father's a doctor, and unless he has his finger down someone's throat, he's not making money. He's selling his time. And I always said I wanted to move away from the acting profession, which is about selling your time, to move into making a product that has a reputation.
That outlives you.
That outlives you and that continues to sell into the future.
Well, look, thank you so much for coming through. This has been a very insightful conversation. I enjoyed it. Our time is very limited, but let's see.
Thank you so much.
Let's see.
Thank you, Z. I appreciate it. And thanks to the behind the scenes team. Can't wait to see the episode.
Yeah.